So I wanted to give you a little background on me as a teacher, since we've talked about me as a performer and me as a student. So I'm a DMA student at Shenandoah Conservatory, so I finished my master's in 2016. And now I decided just to stay around and never leave school, so now I'm getting a doctorate. And my bachelor's, of course, came from OU. And what really kind of inspired me to start using this in my studio is I have a jazz background. So 6 through 12, I went to a performing arts school, and when I was there, I spent most of my music life in a jazz combo, and also spent a lot of time in like jazz clubs and open mic nights and all of that. So having all of those experience really helped me out as far as developing musical ears, which I usually teach middle schoolers, and that's what I'm always struggling with my middle schoolers, is getting them to hear things. And even high schoolers as well, all the way up, you know, I still struggle to hear things. But, so I think specifically that jazz background helped me hear things like chord qualities, to listen in ensembles, which is really important, especially for like freshmen and sophomores in undergrad. And it also gave me a place to use the technical exercises that I was already working on, so things like burden chords, arpeggios, scales and thirds, all of those things. And so some of the exercises we're doing and some of the things I'm going to show you are specifically geared towards a place for your students to play things like scales and thirds, where they're not going to be quite as bored as if you said, let's play your C major scale and thirds. And then I wanted to tell you about my students, so you know kind of where we're angling this. So I work at a middle school in Winchester, Virginia. I go once a week, and I'm there all day. And so while I'm there all day, I spend all of my day with middle school flute students. This middle school is massive. There are 52 flute students in the middle school, 6 through 8, split up into 5 bands. 5 bands, right. So that's where most of this stuff is coming. So basically we run a studio class once a week, and he does that with all of his instruments that he doesn't play, which is amazing and wonderful, and props to him. So most of these things have been made for middle school students, and most of where they're coming from are middle school students, but I have used them in my own private studio for my high schoolers, and I think they would be very applicable to other ages as well. So that's just a good thing to know. So why do we teach music theory? Music theory is something that for some reason before undergrad a lot of students never get. They don't get it in band class, they don't get it in their private lessons, and I think it's necessary, and I think it's really, really important. And so my poor students probably hate me because we do music theory every single week in their private lessons. So music theory encourages some advanced thinking that they're not going to get otherwise, and it keeps them interested. It keeps them so they're not bored, because otherwise your kids will get bored. They just do. It's just how it works. It helps students understand their music better, which is a big one. That's like what we were talking about with Prosa earlier, is, you know, if you don't know what's happening in the piano part, or if you don't know what part of the chord you are or whatever, it's really hard to kind of make those bigger connections as far as things like suggestive pitch, or what color you should use, or what your vibrato choice should be. If you're playing the minor seventh of a chord, you probably shouldn't have a giant big vibrato, you know? And your kids aren't going to understand that, and my students don't understand that. Even when they're in a section and we've talked about it, it just kind of needs a constant reinforcement. Music theory just needs reinforcement, and it prepares them for more advanced literature. So in my studio, we usually start with like 40 little pieces, or I do the blocking method with a lot of my little kids, especially my middle schoolers love blocking method, and I think it really helps them out. And blocking method is good because it has a lot of music theory written into it. But so we're starting with such simple pieces that they can kind of get by without a lot of thought. They can get by without needing to practice a whole lot for their lessons, and so some of them come into lessons every week, and I can tell they haven't practiced, and you all know how it goes. But so encouraging them to do music theory and kind of forcing music theory on them is really helpful. I should have brought, at the end of all of our lessons, for the last 5 minutes, I sit down and write their lesson plan for the next week, and I have worksheets that they do, music theory worksheets that they do. And having something like that for your students is really, really handy. I just printed a bunch. I made a bunch, and then you can find some on websites like Teacher Pay Teacher. I don't know if you have music ed friends, but music ed friends will know with Teacher Pay Teacher. And you can find all of those things, and you can find them online for free, even if you just Google free music theory, whatever. And so I do that a lot with things like key signatures and, oh gosh, everything. Pitches, interval qualities, chord qualities, it just depends on the age of my kid. But having something like that structured into your lesson is really, really helpful as well. Okay, So obviously this is about jazz theory, and that's what the topic is improvisation. So why do we use improvisation to teach any of this stuff? Because a lot of people don't. Most people, unless they have a really strong jazz background, aren't going to be doing improvisation with their kids. They're just not. So I think improvisation is great because it encourages creativity in your students, and that's why they're there. Okay? Especially like my middle school kids, they're playing music because they think it's fun, or they wouldn't do it. They would be in sports or art club or drama or whatever. So if you get them there as middle schoolers and they're there, it's because they want to have fun. So you have to keep constantly reinforcing fun with them, or they're going to stop playing the flute. Yeah, and I've had so many wonderful kids that leave because of that, because they go to other teachers who are no longer having fun or whatever. Then they stop doing music, and they could have been an amazing musician and really brought something to the music world in the future, even if they're not a performer, as an educator or a therapist or whatever. So I think it's really important to just constantly encourage them in that way. Improv helps them develop a sense of line and phrasing, which is really, really hard to teach your kids otherwise. And that's something we all struggle with, right? Even as mature musicians, we still struggle with our line and phrasing. So I think it's really helpful for that. And you can really bring so much into improv that would otherwise be very challenging to teach your students, like line and phrasing is hard to teach kids. It sharpens their musical ears, which again, same thing. We're constantly trying to better ourselves as musicians. We're constantly trying to hear better, etc. So doing improv is really, really good for that. Teaches them technical facility, like we already talked about. You have a place to use those exercises that otherwise your kids are going to get bored doing. And it encourages thoughtful chamber playing. Most of my students have never played in a chamber group. They're in middle school. The first time they get in a chamber group is for solo and ensemble, which at least in Virginia, they don't start doing until 9th grade. So if you can kind of encourage that and teach them that at a younger age, it's going to really help them out as they get older. Okay, so now we're going to play some games. Everyone has a handout, yes? Okay. So the first one we're going to do is building listening skills. And I'm going to require some people. So I'll tell you, I gave this talk at a flute convention, and I'll tell you what I told them. Y'all are going to be my students, okay? This is exactly what I'm going to do with my middle school kids, so I'm sorry you have to be middle schoolers. But you'll probably have a better time with it because you're older and have better musical ears. But so I need 2 volunteers with flutes. There's 1, and there's 2. Okay, come on up. Okay, so this is something that I would do with my kids the first or second week of studio class, and then we would do it every week as a warm-up exercise. But the first time that you do this, you're going to need to talk them through it a whole lot, especially middle schoolers, because otherwise they're going to be terrified, and they're going to be nervous that their friends are going to make fun of them. So what I always tell my kids is you're not allowed to make fun of anybody in this room, and you're not allowed to make fun of anybody when you leave this room. So don't make fun of each other, okay? If anybody struggles, everyone needs to be nice. We need to play nice in here. Flute studio is a fun time. Okay, so we're going to talk through it real fast, and then we'll try it out. So this is one that you can do with multiple kids, or you can do with just 2 kids. In a lesson situation, you would be player 1, and you would have your kid be player 2. However, if you have a student who's really, really nervous about it, you'll let them be player 1 because you're nice. And then you'll be player 2 and tell them it's not scary. And sometimes, if I have a kid who's really nervous about it, I'll mess up my player 2 rule so they think that I just don't know what I'm doing, because then they laugh and then it's fun again. And they get really nervous about this stuff. I don't know why. So what we would do is player 1, you guys can decide who's player 1 or player 2. Feel free. I'll probably make you switch at some point. So player 1 is going to play a long sustained pitch. And what you need to make sure is that your kids aren't looking at each other because they're going to cheat and they're going to look at the fingers. They're going to figure out what the pitch is by the fingers, okay? Because, they're middle schoolers. Y'all are middle schoolers, okay? Middle schoolers like to cheat. So you're going to stand either with your backs to each other, or you can just have them close their eyes. Sometimes it's weird to stand like this and play the flute. So you can do whichever. So player 1's going to pick a pitch. They're going to hold that note. I always tell them, big, beautiful sound. Don't worry about vibrato if you're at an age where the kids are starting to use vibrato. Don't worry about anything. Just pick your favorite note. And usually they're going to pick C. Every once in a while you'll get E. I get a lot of A's. The first note, A, is a good one, or F. And then you're going to have player 2 join in, and they're going to figure out what the pitch is, and then they're going to play a major third above it. So that is the most advanced, not the most advanced form, one of the middle level forms of this game. With new students, which we're going to pretend this is week 1 of middle school band, so new students, you're going to have player 2 find the pitch, because that's going to be easier for them. So player 1, pick your favorite note. Either turn your back or close your eyes. find her